Chapter 10. Hortense, as Miriam had trusted, was all sympathy, though she did not conceal that she was also scandalized. It had not been necessary to make such a fuss. Miriam had only to be patient till Jules came tonight with news. True to his word, Jules did bring news. He had learned that Captain Johnson had made a petition which would be considered by the Governor of Canada when he arrived in Montreal. Meanwhile, the captain was allowed out of the prison only under guard, and was not allowed to communicate with anyone. The two little girls had been purchased by wealthy families. Also, Jules had heard, there was a prisoner by the name of Labourie, working on a seigneury north of the city. Miriam tried to be content with this reassurance. At least they all appeared to be safe. But how drearily the days must drag for Susanna. All she herself could do now was to behave circumspectly and, if it were possible, to win her way back into Madame Ducasse's good graces. She was astonished, therefore, at an unexpected bit of graciousness on Madame's part. The lady of the house swept into Félicité's room a few mornings later, where Miriam, forgetting her good intentions, was allowing Félicité to chatter aimlessly, was, to be truthful, egging her on. Nothing could have induced her to speak the name of Pierre Laroche, but bit by bit, from Félicité's chance remarks, she was piecing together an intriguing picture. Now, at her mother's step, Félicité hurriedly dipped her pen into the ink-pot and pulled her forehead into exaggerated wrinkles of concern over a neglected sentence. "Never mind the lesson," said Madame, not at all deceived. "I have heard from Miriam. It seems that one of the children, your sister's child, did you say, has been purchased by my good friend, the mayor's wife." "Thank you, Madame," replied Miriam meekly. "Now it appears the child is being difficult," Madame went on. "My friend has suggested that I bring you to see her, so that perhaps you can reason with her." "Oh, I should love to see Polly!" exclaimed Miriam, delighted and grateful. "I do thank you, Madame." "I am merely doing it to oblige my friend," Madame assured her. "You will make certain, I trust, that there are no demonstrations this time?" It was too much to expect that there would be no reminders, Miriam thought, flushing. But she must show nothing but gratitude. Félicité was overjoyed. "Oh, Miriam!" she rejoiced. "Now you will have to go with us in the carriage. What shall I wear, maman? The new velvet?" "Certainly not. The blue morning dress will do well enough for this occasion." Madame's gaze lingered deliberately over Miriam. Then she shrugged and turned away. "Be quick," she ordered. "I shall wait for you downstairs." The moment the door was closed, Félicité bounced into action. "I've wanted to dress you up ever since you came. Don't let maman hear us. Just you wait and see what I'm going to do to you." The blue lustring, I think. It is too small for me anyway. But, Madame, never mind her. Now take off that horrid dress." The soft lightness of silk slipping over her shoulders gave Miriam a shock of delight. "You can't look yet," Félicité ordered, fluffing out the full sleeves, tugging at the fastenings. "What a tiny waist you have. I wish mine were as small. I think my foot is smaller than yours, though. But try these shoes anyway. Now, you will need a hat. And gloves. What a pity about your hair. We haven't time to arrange it. But with the hat, see? You tip it just like this. Now, come and look at yourself." Just 2 steps to the long mirror, but in those 2 steps, Miriam travelled a distance she could never retrace. The girl who looked back from the mirror was a total stranger, yet she had always been there, waiting. "That is really Miriam Willard," she said under her breath. She could not drag her eyes away from the vision. "Come along, silly," urged Félicité. "I think maman is going to have a fit when she sees you." Madame was certainly startled. "This was entirely unnecessary," she snapped. For a moment Miriam held her breath, awaiting the order that would strip all the finery away. But Madame shrugged. "Well, it is late. They are expecting us." Following Félicité out the front door, teetering in the 2 tight, high-heeled boots, Miriam felt a heady surge of confidence. She would show these people. Her hat tilted as loftily as Madame's own. This time she would step into that carriage as though she had ridden behind a footman every day of her life. They had not far to go. In fact, they could have walked the distance in a few moments, and the carriage had barely set in motion before it drew up at an imposing stone house that Miriam remembered Hortense had pointed out to her on the way to the market. What would Hortense think of her now, she wondered. Could she see her entering the front door, walking into the drawing-room and curtsying to the mayor's wife, and seating herself delicately on a gilded chair? Like a punctured bubble, her pleasure vanished, when presently a servant led in little Polly. The child's face blurred in the sudden tears that sprang to her eyes. Scrubbed and brushed and dressed in a bright new jumper, Polly looked more sick and miserable than at any time on the Indian trail. She gave no sign that she recognized Miriam, merely stood staring at the strange clothes that had made her aunt an alien like the others. "Polly, dear, 'tis Miriam. Don't you know me?" Polly refused even to touch her outstretched hand. Were they mistreating the child? She looked so pale and listless. Indignant words sprang to Miriam's lips, but looking up at the mayor's wife, she could read only bewilderment and concern on that pleasant face. "Perhaps you can talk to her?" the mayor's wife pleaded. "Tell her to eat her food like a good child. She is so sweet and quiet, no trouble at all except that she will not eat. She needs some good milk and eggs to put roses in her cheeks. Tell me, is there anything she is especially fond of? I will get it for her." It was impossible to doubt this woman's kind intent. "It is not the food that is wrong," Miriam explained, as tactfully as she could. "Polly has never been away from her mother. Ever since the day we were captured, she has needed to have her mother in sight." There was a sudden cry. Flinging herself violently across the room, Polly buried her head in Miriam's blue skirt. "Mama!" she wailed. "I want Mama! Take me back to Mama!" Miriam knelt and hugged the child tight. "Polly, don't cry," she begged. "Mama will come soon. Please, Polly, be a good girl so that when Mama comes she will find you looking all pretty and well." The mayor's wife reached down and dragged Polly away, holding her firmly on her own lap. "I did not ask you to come here to lie to the child," she accused Miriam. "Lie to her?" "It will do no good to deceive her," the woman repeated. "Alphonsine has a new mother now. She must learn to be a good little French girl." "But, madame—" "You have done nothing but upset her. She has never cried like this before. Please go now, quickly." Madame Ducrest was only too ready to end this distressing affair. As Polly was borne howling from the room, she maneuvered the girls through the door and into the carriage, with the bitter wails echoing in their ears. So Miriam was not a grand lady, fashionably dressed, making a morning call in a genteel manner. The pretty picture was shattered. No matter how dressed up they might be, she and Polly were prisoners. Madame Ducrest, surprisingly, showed a moment's sympathy. "She will not cry long," she said briskly. "She will be quite all right as soon as you are out of sight, and some day she will come to realize what a fortunate little girl she is. Now, since you are out with us, I think I shall take you to call on the other child, and you will see how foolish your suspicions have been." Humbled girl who alighted at the next door. This house was nowhere near so grand. It was an older, one-story wooden dwelling with a scarlet-painted door. The room into which they stepped was cozy and welcoming. Miriam looked about for Susanna with apprehension, and could hardly believe her eyes when the child came running joyously to meet her. "What a pretty dress!" Sue cried. "Miriam, you look just beautiful!" Miriam seized the child's hands and smiled back at her affectionately. Sue had been eating, beyond a doubt. Her cheeks were round and pink, and her chubby little legs showed sturdily under the short dress. "You look beautiful, too," Miriam answered. "You've grown an inch, Sue, and you look so grown up." "It's my new shoes. I just got them yesterday." Sue held out a foot for Miriam to admire, clad in a dainty white-topped leather boot that Félicité might envy. "I have a red pair, too, to wear to school every day, and I have 6 white petticoats. I have a room all to myself with a big bed. Come and see where I sleep, Miriam." Miriam looked up at the 2 women who stood behind Sue. One was tall and sharp-nosed, with grey in her hair. The other was younger and rounder, but both had exactly the same expression of fond pride and pleasure. "She wants to show me her room," Miriam interpreted, and the 2 women smiled more broadly than before. Excusing herself from Madame Ducrest, Miriam allowed Sue to pull her through the curtained doorway, through a tidy chamber where the 2 women apparently slept, into a tiny bedroom beyond. This room was so new and pretty, so recently painted and freshly curtained, that it must have been expressly planned for the little girl who slept there. "What a lovely room, Sue," Miriam said admiringly. "But I thought you were at a convent." "I was, for quite a few days. It was nice there, too. But then Tante Claudine and Tante Anne came to get me. They said I would be their little girl. Tante Anne made all these clothes for me. I like her better than Tante Claudine. She plays little games with me so I can understand what she says." "Where do you go to school?" "At the convent. Tante Anne takes me there every morning. Miriam, there are Indian girls there, too, and they dress just like us. They aren't like the Indians at St. Francis. They can sew so fast, much faster than I can." "Are you really learning to sew?" "Look what I'm making, Miriam. 'Tis an etui." Miriam admired the little bag with its bright blue embroidery. "I'm making it for Mamma. Do you think she will like it?" Underneath all the chatter and vanity, Sue was still a little girl who missed her mother. "Mamma will love it," Miriam said. "You must hurry and finish it before she comes." "When is she coming, Miriam?" "I don't know, dear. I wish you could know how safe and well you are here." Sue looked down at her new boots thoughtfully. "I wish Polly could be here, too. Do you know where Polly is, Miriam? Does she have a nice room to sleep in?" "I've just been to see Polly. She has pretty clothes, just like you, but she isn't happy. You know how she always wanted to be near her mamma." Sue's face was sober. "Poor Polly. She's too little to know about the Blessed Mother." Miriam started. "What do you mean, Sue?" "See, up there? The sisters gave it to me. She takes care of me." Miriam was disturbed. Indeed, she had noticed, the moment she had entered the room, the little statue that hung above Susanna's bed. What heathenish things were these women teaching a 4-year-old child who could not understand any better? "What have they told you, Sue?" There was a fierceness in her tone that brought sudden tears to the child's eyes. "They said she's the mother of our Lord," she explained, her lips trembling. "They said I must pray to her every night to keep Mom and the baby safe out there in the woods. Isn't it all right for me too, Miriam?" It was all wrong, Miriam knew. All her life she had been taught to despise this mysterious evil called popery. Her grandfather had left England so that his children would never be taught such things. But looking down into Susanna's troubled face, Miriam did not know what to say. She looked back instead at the little statue of the mother and child. It was a simple hand-carved figurine, but it had been fashioned with skill and reverence. There was such gentleness in the way the mother's arm curved about her child. "Don't you think she's pretty?" Sue asked. "Mamma used to sit beside the fire and rock captive just like that. In the night, when I wake up and it's all dark, I reach up and touch her, and then I can go back to sleep." Miriam stooped and put both arms around Susanna. "I think she's beautiful," she whispered. "I'm sure it can't be wrong, Sue, if it keeps you from being lonely. When Mamma comes, you can tell her about it." The puckers smoothed out of Sue's forehead. She wiped her eyes on the corner of Miriam's handkerchief and was her practical little self again. "I hope she comes soon," she said confidently. "I want to show her my new shoes. Do you think when I go with Mamma they will let me keep them?" That night, lying awake in the darkness of the loft over the kitchen, Miriam's troubled thoughts went back to those disturbing moments. What should she have answered? Sue's childish question had confronted her with a puzzle she had been trying to thrust into a far corner of her mind. What was there that was so dreadful about the way these people worshipped? At home, everyone had spoken of the French as an idolatrous folk. But surely Hortense and Félicité, the kind women she had met today, even Madame, for all her haughtiness, were not wicked. Moreover, she could not escape seeing, as she went about the city, that their religion was as real and natural a part of these people's lives as the air and sunshine. On the streets, the gentle priests and sisters mingled with the common folk and were greeted as friends. Last Sunday morning Hortense had offered to take her to church, but, terrified at the thought, she had sat alone in the kitchen and repeated every word she could remember of the divine service. In the wilderness, James had never allowed them to omit their worship. It was up to her now to uphold that faith. Yet today, confronted by Sue's troubled eyes, she had betrayed all her teaching. Her own father would be angry, she knew. Susanna? She was not sure. There was a stern core of duty in Susanna that would make it difficult to ask her such a question. There was one person she longed to ask. Phineas Whitney, who was planning to become a minister. Strange, when they had never had the slightest chance to speak of such things, that she knew she would never be afraid to ask him anything. She was glad she had answered as she had. Somehow, no matter what Susanna might say, she could not believe that a difference in belief should cause any child to be lonely and afraid. It was a very new thought.